Welcome back, everyone. I am the Depressed Eeyore, and this is Middara. Since we had a full restore, I went ahead and reorganized the items and distributed the things. So our last encounter, we actually got nano robes, which is fantastic. I passed down the too many belts to Rook to make him even more tanky and melee. And pretty much I distributed everything away from Zeke, so he has as much inventory space as possible. He's going to keep the longsword for now. I think I've mentioned this before, but dual wielding longswords is definitely a thing you can do, especially since the sword combo does stack. So you can get +2 physical damage just raw from it, which is pretty nice. Everything we've already done experience, we're good on that. A few rules things that I've been kind of messing up. One I did kind of mention already, which is the +1 shield for that you get from cloth armor when you're dodging. That isn't just on the dodge that you get from the hoodie. It's not like Nimble, where you only get the bonus on Nimble. So I just need to remember that more often. The other thing that I have been making a mistake on for quite a while now, I've been reading the discussions on Discord, the Discord channel, about was it elusive? Because they're just fighting a boss that had elusive and flight. And what I didn't realize is elusive. I thought it was for any movement, or sorry, any voluntary movement. But actually, if you read it, it says it only prevents the break attacks from opponents who are adjacent to them at the start of the turn. So those people that are around the person at the very start can't do any break attacks against someone that's elusive. But anyone that's outside that range can do that. That includes people that are, using reach weapons with provoke or something along those lines. So elusive is actually not as powerful as I thought it was. Now, if you have both elusive and flights, you pretty much become immune to all break attacks involving voluntary movement. So the more you know. So yeah, I'll just need to remember that in the future whenever a water lord decides to dash through all my characters at once, or someone dashes into all my characters at once. So, there you go. Anyway, I believe we have some story stuff to read. We already did the experience. We restored adventurers. We need to go to page 85. Someone's there. Remy used the nearby bushes to scrape off the remainder of the gore before sheathing her weapon. All around them, the monsters were dead. Got him, Nightingale said as she turned towards Remy and reached up for a high five. But Remy didn't move. Remy? Nightingale waved a hand at her, without effect. Are you going to leave me hanging? Remy was too busy staring off into the distance to notice. She squinted up the hill and into the trees. She saw a flash of color, something bright red against the evergreens. A few seconds of staring, and the patch moved again, giving definition to a human figure. Was this the culprit, or maybe a survivor? Remy wasn't sure, but then the figure started running. She didn't wait for any confirmation. She didn't even feel the need to signal her friends. Remy took off running, using her wings to propel herself forward at a blinding speed. Behind her, Nightingale stood, one hand stupidly in the air. The figure was big, even taller than Rook, and probably wider too. The man turned sharply left, making his way deeper into the forest, but Remy didn't slow down. The tall trees forced Remy to tuck her wings in and take chase on foot. She leapt over a stream, not caring as mud splattered everywhere in the landing. Her heart hammered in her chest as he closed the distance on the retreating back. Where Rook's advancement had not robbed him of his speed, this man was more hulking than graceful. He snapped branches and crushed saplings, leaving an obvious trail. There was no way he was going to get away. Hey! The man ignored Remy's shout, but he couldn't ignore the sliding tackle that took him right in the ankle. All that weight turned into a tumble, and he landed in a sprawled, moaning heap. Remy landed far more gracefully. She drew her weapon as she approached the fallen man, walking slowly. She was sure the shouts and pounding footsteps in the forest behind him were her friends catching up. It would be better to confront this man with some backup. Why the hell were you... Remy didn't finish, freezing in place as she heard a quiet click from beneath the man she'd sent to the ground. The massive man had rolled onto his back, his face and scraggly beard covered with mud. A single long scar ran almost the entire length of his face, crossing over one of his eyes and down to his neck. The eye looked like it might be glass, though Remy's attention was mostly focused on the gun aimed at her face. Remy dropped her weapon, stepping back a few steps and raising both hands. Easy there. The gun was an intricately carved flintlock pistol, deadly looking and beautifully crafted. That's right. The man rolled onto his feet, the gun never losing track of Remy. He grinned with wickedly pointed teeth, almost like a shark's. You stay right there and don't move. If you follow me, I'll shoot you. Got it? Toss that over there. Got it. Remy held very still, staring into the barrel. Good girl. The man backed up for another few paces before turning and bolting suddenly away. True to his word, Remy didn't follow. A few seconds later, Nightingale came bursting through the trees behind her. What the hell is your deal? She asked, gasping with one hand on her chest. Remy picked up her fallen weapon, brushing off the mud. Sorry, Knight. I saw someone spying on us. I tried to catch him, but he had a gun. Nightingale put a hand on her hip. Really? You mean running off by yourself into the woods might have been dangerous? She rolled her eyes. Did you at least catch what he looked like? Yeah, Remy said, picking up her weapon and putting it away. Oh, I guess he was picking up his weapon. Weird. For the second time in 2 days, Remy found herself in her father's study. The group was covered in a multitude of minor injuries that made it clear that they had just gone through a fight. Malik peered at the group from behind his desk, looking a bit amused at their condition. I assume you decided to not get the guards? Remy met his eyes. I read the letter. We decided to investigate ourselves. Really? Malik didn't sound angry with her. Rather, he sounded concerned. That wasn't safe, sweetie. Anything big enough to stop that caravan could have killed you, too. We know. She reached back, rubbing one sore wing. You were right. It was attacked. It was clearly not an accident. We learned some interesting things. Malik looked up with excitement. There was a suspicious man at the scene. He had this wicked scar all over the right side of his face. Remy explained, drawing it on her own face with a finger. Did he hurt you? Malik asked seriously, standing and putting a hand on his desk. He pointed a gun at me. I'm sorry, I couldn't capture him for you. He did what? Malik said, standing and putting a hand on his desk. He pointed a gun at me? Remy stammered. He threatened my daughter? His eye twitched once before he folded his hands across his lap, going deadly silent. Remy nodded slowly, glancing briefly towards his friends. He didn't shoot me. I mean, it could have been You've done more than I could have expected, Malik said, cutting her off abruptly. When Malik met Remy's eyes, his face lacked any emotion she could read. Your institute education appears to be paying off. I'm impressed. Are you mad? Remy asked, her voice high and timid. With you? Malik smiled. Not at all. You've proved yourself more capable than I could have imagined. Remy made a little sigh of relief. Do you know the guy? Unfortunately, Malik drew out one of his black ledgers and scribbled something there. A former associate of mine. He cleared his throat. Thank you all for your help. I will be able to take steps on my own from this point. As they left, Remy caught him muttering to himself, there will be payment rendered in kind. Alright, new story flag. Mark the story flag culprit identified on the adventure sheet. Then return to the story round. So it's the same story round, so I will not be able to do the bounty again. Alright, so that's been marked. Page 81. Alright, well, before we do anything else, we have experience to spend. We do have gold to spend if we want to, but I don't think there's really anything I would want to spend gold on. I could upgrade Zeke's armor, but I'm going to go ahead and hold off on that for now. I mean, I was planning on not upgrading Rook's armor, but since I was giving up the health from the gene tweak, I figured it would be best to buff up his HP to make up for it a little bit. But anyway, our experience right now is 7,377, Zeke being the 3. Zeke will not be able to purchase any new disciplines until he gets at least 5 experience, in which case it has to be a level 2. If he wants another level 1, it would cost him 6 experience now, because he has 3 level 1s right now. But Remy, Nightingale, and Rook are all capable of purchasing a level 3 discipline at this point. So let's start with Remy. As you could probably guess, it's probably going to involve something involving summoning. And I would not want to disappoint you. So, thankfully this one's on top. Friends with Benefits, level 3 assemblage, passive. When you use the Disciplined Summoning, gain 1 additional summon token, and all loyal espers you summon get +1 defense. Nothing too glamorous, it's just raw buffing and making your summons a little bit more tanky. In one of my previous playthroughs, I did attempt to use Exalted Summoning. I find it's just not that great. It's a single use. You can use like one of these 4 cards here, but most of them are pretty dangerous to use, and a lot of them require a little bit of RNG, so not exactly something I want to mess with. Helping Hands, on the other hand, I think it's a pretty good one. Lets you actually carry an additional consumable and relic, so having 4 relic slots would be nice. Also, you also get an exhaust ability that gives you flight and 2 movement. But for right now, Remy's going to go ahead and get herself Friends with Benefits. So getting access to a level 3 assemblage ability, it doesn't matter which one, does give Remy access to level 3 summons. Also, as you may remember, the summoning actual discipline gives you summon tokens equal to your highest level discipline, so that would be 3. So let's go ahead and make some copies. So now we have 3, and then an additional one for Friends with Benefits. So whenever we summon now, we'll have, or summon using the summoning discipline, we'll have 4 of these tokens that can allow us to do free actions outside their turn. As for level 3 summons, we have a few options. Well, actually it's just one option, and it's fantastic. We get access to Femk and Dim, or DM, however you should pronounce it. They are both level 3, and they're both, if you look in the top right corner, it says Fragile. What Fragile means is they have half as much HP as they should. So while Elifie would have 34 HP, just like Remy, Femke, or Femk, and DM will both have 17 HP. Now, what's kind of neat about it, about the twin Savani, is when summoning Femke or DM, you automatically summon the twin sister. This is the only exception to the rule for summoning. Whenever you're summoning espers, you can only have one summon at a time. Like, it doesn't matter if you have multiple means of summoning on different characters. For an encounter, only one esper can be out at a time. Femke and DM are the only exception, in which case you can have both of them out at the same time. So their special ability is the first time they would miss an attack, they get to re-roll the attack roll. And then they both have the passive Best Friends, which is they both get Nimble, which means they get a free dodge with +1 shield. And then while they're both on the board, they both gain Backstab and Resistance to Magic, which means they only take half damage from magic, and Backstab is where you get +3 damage whenever you are flanking. So Femke here is essentially the physical attacker. A lot of her stuff is about attacking multiple times and doing provoke. And her attack is automatically empowered with the Spear of Vel, and it's also a reach too. She can also get a free attack with False Idol. Brutal Slaughter can only trigger on her 3rd or later attack, but when it does +6 damage. Also, she can spend 1 additional stamina whenever she hits to do a follow-up attack. Besides that, everything else is pretty similar. Presence is 4, Lore 2, Agility 6, Perception 4, and Strength 2. They have 6 movement, no armor. DM has the same skills and stats, but she's all about magic. She does have a free attack with False Idol, but she also has Resonance, which she has to exhaust ahead of time, which is a little annoying. But if she happens to get a star on that attack that she exhausted, she can do Ruination without paying its SP cost, and it can be targeting a different figure, which is the spell she has access to, which is Ruination. She casts spell 6 against up to 2 different opponents with an SOI, and reduce the SP cost of this ability by 1 if all targets have an effect. So an effect being like poison, darkness, etc. And it deals magic damage equal to the result of a roll from DM's highest casting die, which right now would just be an orange die, because that's what Remy's is. Now, for DM, her casting is automatically empowered. If you look in the bottom, it actually shows the empowered die with the casting die. So all of her spells, no matter what, are empowered. But since I'm, of course, using a talisman for both these characters, that's going to be empowered for everything. Also, she has access to Blood Toll, which is where she deals 2 damage to herself to gain additional 2 stamina. So she can hurt herself to get more actions. And there you go. So we got Femke and DM. I'm going to go ahead and grab their cards, because I'm probably going to end up using them in the future. They are a bit fragile, as the name implies. But with 17 HP, it's about the equivalent. It's more HP than freaking Zeke has, so it's still not too bad. Yeah, we'll just put them with the cards. Oops. So, Femke and DM. And then I will include their figures for the future. There's one other summon that we don't have access to yet, which is a level 4 summon. So we can't get access to it until pretty much much later, essentially. Ava DM. Make sure you don't get confused. There are 2 other Twin Savanis in the pile of figures, and those are for somebody else. All right. So we got all that together. Next, that was 7 experience, by the way, so let's go ahead and set her back to 0. Zeke is not going to get anything. Nightingale is going to get... so she's going to get Precise Strike. Ninjutsu is tempting because it gives +1 defense, but all I want is offense on her right now. So Precise Strike, 7 cost, Exhaust. If you have a 2-handed ranged weapon, you can make a ranged attack. This attack gains +2 to your normal range value, so in this case it would go 8 range. If this attack roll is at least 4 higher than the target's defense, including defense added from abilities, this attack gains +5 irreducible damage. So this is a way of doing irreducible damage, but for the most part, unless you're building specifically to get your attack as high as possible, don't expect that to trigger too often. Essentially, I have to roll max to have any hope of getting that +5 irreducible, because the highest I can get is if I stay still, I can get a 16. And we're already fighting things with at least 12 defense sometimes, or upwards to 12 defense. So essentially, you have to roll max. But still, it's a free attack, which is great, because that just gives her more shots to do more and more damage. So pretty straightforward. And now she is on her way to getting her 4th tier Subterfuge, which is going to be awesome once she gets it. Now for Rook, he's going to get a support ability. He's going to get Font of Renewal. It's a Sanctus level 3 ability. Once per encounter, place a Font of Renewal terrain token on normal spaces so that at least 1 space is within SOI. Figures may occupy this space. Spaces this token occupies as though it were empty normal terrain spaces. Allies within 6 spaces of the Font of Renewal token may remove an effect or heal 2 during their status phase. So essentially, you can just plop down a healing well, essentially, that will remove status effects and heal. The remove the status things is actually pretty important because it happens during the status phase, which means you can actually decide the order of operation during the status phase, so you can actually get rid of poison before it triggers or condemn before it triggers, which can be pretty good. As for the Font Renewal, it's actually a 2x2, which is the only disadvantage. It's both an advantage and disadvantage because it does cover more ground, which means you can easily get within range of it. But it can only be placed on normal terrain, and it has to be all 4 spaces have to be normal terrain. So that's a little limiting. But now we have that, which will hopefully make things like dealing with the Blighted Terror a lot easier, because now it can actually remove status effects. Alright, and that is it. That is all the stuff we need. We're good to go. We can't do any, there's no more side quests. We have already attempted the bounty. We did the Malik's mission. So all we have left is is the murdered informant. So let's go ahead and dive right into that. I'm just kind of doing one last sweep of seeing if there's anything else I want to mess with. I think the answer is no. I think we're good with what we have. Alright, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and dive right in. So page 87. Alright. Main quest, Murdered Informant. They stopped at a street vendor for dinner before making their way back to Malik's mansion. Remy recognized Malik's personal guard even from a distance. There were at least half a dozen men congregated outside the mansion. Every one of them wore black cloaks or black armor or black mask. What do you think is going on? Nightingale asked, her voice barely a whisper. Do you think we should come back later, maybe? Remy thought about it for a few seconds, then shook her head. No. Everybody stay close. I'll get you in. Remy advanced purposely towards the front door, squaring her shoulders and not looking away from the door. It didn't work. One of the men stepped in front of her, blocking the door with broad shoulders. Sorry, you can't come in. Like hell I can't. Remy ducked under one of his arms. It's my house. As big as he was, the man seemed surprised by her determination. He actually dodged out of her way, and Remy was able to shove on the door. It was unlocked, and it swung in with the violence of her pressure. None of the house servants were in the entryway, though there were a few startled guards. They moved as though to lift their weapons. Remy glowered at them. What are you going to do? Attack me? Does my family pay you to protect us? One of the guards whispers to the other, and they both relaxed. Then they lowered their weapons, reluctantly getting out of her way. Damn, Zeke said. You tell him. It's my house, she said. They just work here. Fair enough. Remy could hear voices from further in, probably the courtyard. One was her father's, though she couldn't place the identity of the other, a woman. It couldn't have been an accident, the woman said. Whoever took it knew at least one of the combinations. The evidence for that was clear enough from what was left. We need to take the firmest possible action before the situation spirals completely out of control. What we can't do is tip our hand, Malik replied. There are too many in the city who would seize on such a visible sign of weakness. Our reaction must be swift, but not panicked. Around the first corner was a set of wide doors leading into the courtyard. As Remy rounded them, she suddenly had an uninterrupted view. Her father stood beside one of the fountains, and at his side, a sleazy-looking girl was talking to him. She was dressed casually in an outfit that could have come from Earth, ripped jeans and a half-open leather top. She was lithe and thin, with full-sleeve tattoos of twisting plants rising up both her arms, which I believe is this person here. Hello, Grace. Dad, what's going on? Remy called from the doorway. There were more guards inside, though they wore white and blue colors and flanked the woman instead of the father. Remy, you're safe. Malik looked over at her, and Remy made her way over. Her father embraced her with noticeable relief. Grace Zhang said she hadn't seen you. I was worried. We're fine. Remy looked up at a stranger, confused. Grace Zhang? I didn't even know she was actually expecting us. How would she have even known we were here? I know everything that happens in my city. The thin girl turned towards Remy. Half the city was looking for you, but I can't see you're perfectly fine. Remy blushed and bowed. Duchess, I didn't know it was you. If I had known, I would... Grace cut her off with a short tone. Oh, please. Save the bullshit formalities for Alenia. They have no place here. Grace looked past Remy, finally noticing her companions. Zeke, is that you? Zeke nodded awkwardly. Cousin! Grace squealed, her tone relaxing instantly. Malik told me you were here. He said you were headed to my castle to stay the night. You really should have visited. Zeke returned an awkward hug. We found an inn we liked before we made it. We were meaning to head that way. No doubt. And you? Grace had noticed Zeke's other companion, and she extended a hand to Nightingale. You're Balthazar's youngest, Nightingale. Nightingale took the offered hand, though she didn't get a chance to say anything. Remy met her father's eyes again. What's with all the guards? There's been a murder in Ramstead. There was a moment of shocked silence. You can't be serious. Rook hadn't been introduced, but he didn't seem to care. Nobody would kill another human being when they could live forever, Grace finished for him. Oh, they would. Don't be naive. They are scoundrels without moral compunction, just like back on Earth. As Duchess of Ramstead, seeing that their punishment is as swift and brutal as possible is my responsibility. She frowned disapprovingly at them. You should have stayed at my castle last night. Where there were guards and high walls. It's worse than just a murder, Malik added, addressing his daughters directly. Sweetie, the man who was murdered was one of my information brokers, the one I rely on for information about exotic magic. Whoever killed him got away with all kinds of important documents. He didn't need to finish that sentence. Remy knew exactly what he meant. Remy was frozen for a moment, unable to respond. Nightingale's life depended on learning the truth about Theodosian, and her best hope was for finding it had just been murdered. Well then, we'll just have to track down the one who did it. We've already fought dozens of monsters, so what's a few more? Malik's expression twisted with guilt. I promised your mother I wouldn't get you involved in all this. Let me handle it. There's danger here you can't imagine. I'm not going to sit by and watch my friend die because some asshole stole the papers we need. Grace interjected, sounding annoyed. Watch your friend die? Nightingale shot Remy an angry glance, and Remy realized what she had just said. It's really important we find more about Theodosian. Nightingale's life might depend on it, Remy pleaded. Grace's eyes went wide. Where is Balthazar in all of this? Why is his daughter in such a perilous position? He'd have our heads if he even knew she was in this room. If we got Nightingale killed by letting her quest on her own, we'd be lucky if our heads were the only ones the arsons took. Malik nodded in agreement. Grace is right. We can't get involved. If anything happened to you, it would mean trouble for all of us. If we hear anything, we'll let you know. Remy glanced over her shoulder at her friends. She was obviously trying to hide it, but there was a look of desperation in Nightingale's eyes. It was more than Remy could stand. Fine. Whatever. You just take care of it. Take care of it then. She turned away. Find me if you change your mind. We'll just stay out of your way. She stormed past her friends, dragging Nightingale by the wrist. They followed her out the doors of the room and around a corner. Remy! Malik yelled. She didn't hear the rest of what Malik had to say, but because by then she had already made it to the front door. She held it open for her friends before slamming it shut and glaring at the guards, daring them to try and make her stay. They didn't. Continued to sneak into the crime scene, page 89. Boop. All right. They walked to the nearest central intersection, where a great stone balcony protected pedestrians from an impressive drop down into the city's lower tiers. Nightingale found it hard to appreciate the view just now. Malik's informant had been murdered, and her own future might be dead too. She turned her back on the ocean, facing her concerned friends. Well, we obviously can't wait. She tried to keep the desperation and fear out of her voice, though she didn't do a good job. You're right, Rook said. So what should we do? Find another informant somewhere else? No, Nightingale replied. This one's already had what we needed. There might not be anyone else in the whole damn kingdom who knows about Theodosian magic. Zeke looked out over the ocean. Maybe not, but how can we find a killer the authorities can't? I can take you there. Nightingale might have thought she was only hearing her own thoughts, but now she knew better. It sounded like a thought, except that it wasn't her own. There was a distinct alien quality about it, one that produced an involuntary wave of nausea with it. Startled by the voice, Nightingale jumped back, striking the stone railing with her tail. She looked around, but found only her friend staring at her. Theodosians leaves a stain on your world wherever it goes, much like humans do. With each new word, a wave of nausea hit Nightingale, and she clutched the railing to stay standing. How could a thought sound so smug, so full of itself? She wanted to hit something, but the only thing in front of her was Zeke looking dumbly at her behind a cigarette. Why don't you come out so I can kick your ass? Nightingale hissed. Zeke looked around and then back at the princess. Knight? Are you okay? It's talking to me, Nightingale whispered. The Maluma. Her friends all glanced at each other, their eyes full of worry. Knight? Zeke mumbled, putting an arm around her. Are you okay? It's talking to you? Rook asked, glancing around them nervously as if the creature would appear at any moment. Nightingale nodded, her eyes wide. I heard it back in Balthazar's study. I was hoping that it was just... She shook her head and trailed off. What did it say? It might be important. It doesn't matter. It's gone now. The color drained slowly from her face. She didn't elaborate. Zeke looked concerned, but he didn't pressure her any further. I suggest we find out where the murder happened. My cousin rules the city. If the murder is such a big deal, I bet everybody is talking about it. We could just ask around and see where it happened. The crime scene should be a good place to start. Nightingale nodded. Maybe we'll get lucky, and the murderer left behind the info we need. It seemed like wishful thinking, but Nightingale would take what she could get. They found the informant's house after less than an hour of searching. Zeke had been right. All he had to do was ask, and anyone who knew his family was happy to point them in the right direction. They found the house on one of the lowest levels of the city, only just above the ocean. Unfortunately, the house was guarded. Its doors were flanked by 2 men, though they clearly not with the city watch. They wore the same black as Malik's house guards and lurked near the house instead of standing out in the open. You guys wait here. Remy slid her tools away, straightening herself. I'll talk to the guards, then let you in from the inside. Rook frowned. Are you sure, Remy? Those aren't city guards. She nodded. They're Black Hand. They'll know Malik's daughter. Even if they've never met me, they'll listen. What's the Black Hand? Zeke asked, glancing around the corner at the guards. Sounds like a shady group. It's my dad's organization. Remy's confidence faltered, but she had no argument. They're spies, or private contractors for the aristocracies. She shook her head vigorously. We have bigger problems right now. You guys hold on. She left. Yeah, not shady at all, Zeke muttered. Her dad looks like a supervillain and his henchman guarding the crime scene. That's strike 2, I think. They watched as Remy strode out into the street, walking straight for the door. You two, she called. I have a message from my father, Malik. Nightingale watched a few minutes of tense conversation from behind a stunted shrub, staying low enough to stay hidden. Zeke and Rook waited beside her, all 3 of them ready to spring to Remy's aid if she needed to. She didn't, and soon enough the guards hurried off. After they'd left, Remy entered the house, and a long minute passed before her face appeared from the now open front door. She waved them over urgently. Nice, Nightingale said as she moved towards Remy. How'd you get them to leave like that? She trailed off as soon as she got a good look at Remy. Her face was pale and her eyes were practically solid purple. Nightingale was about to ask what was wrong when the stench hit her. She nearly doubled over, catching herself with a hand on the wall, like rotting half-cooked meat left out long enough to get maggoty. Sweet Jesus, what is that? Zeke sounded just as queasy as Nightingale felt. It looks worse than it smells, Remy squeaked. She wasn't lying. Rook slammed the door behind him, locking it. Nightingale had to pause to take in the group's sight. If Nightingale imagined what it might be like for someone to explode from the inside, she wouldn't have been far off. Blood and gore covered every surface of the small front room. It was concentrated around a desk and chair in a series of gruesome splatters. Some bits looked like they'd almost been cooked, while others were raw and had flies buzzing around them in low circles. Nightingale found a clean corner of the house to vomit. She spent several minutes hyperventilating, trying and failing to ignore the smell. Eventually she dug into her pack, removing a rag and tying it around her face. When she finally rejoined her friends, she found them investigating. They were huddled around a black ledger. Behind them, Suri was floating and reading the ledger over Rook's shoulder. Suri was still formed of light, and the violet glow she brought made the room seem even more ghastly. Nightingale swayed a bit as she listened to Rook read. Anzu of the pure waters, recovered 19 talents of gold, Pascal scepter of rubies, Lord Boer, 1 carved puzzle. Suri cut him off. Those names should not be here. She floated across the room, glancing about. Rook, these names came from my realm. Every one of them has been killed. On Middara? Zeke frowned down at the list. There are that many of you here? She nodded. We are all subject to the rules of this world in different ways. Those are all dark names, but that does not justify the way they died. Blue storm clouds seemed to roll about Zuri's feet, crackling with silent lightning. That might be property stolen from the dead. Dangerous spoils, Rook. Your kind should not tamper with the possessions of creatures like these. Rook shut the book, tucking it away into a massive pocket. So what? This guy was peddling rare and dangerous artifacts? Was this a robbery? Rook glanced around the room. I mean, I don't see any rare magical artifacts in here. Zeke shrugged. I'd rather think about this outside. Good idea. Remy still looked pale as she led the way towards the door. I can use some fresh air. They were almost to the back door when something crashed from the basement. A faint female voice sounded from just below the floorboards, though Nightingale couldn't make out the words. Rook pointed silently to a scuffed patch of floor just in front of them. He reached down and pulled sharply on it, an uneven junction between two floorboards. A hatch swung open, revealing a ladder down into the gloom. The interior might be dark, but it was thankfully devoid of blood. There was no need for deliberation. Nightingale followed Rook down the ladder, Remy and Zeke just behind her. It led to a cellar bigger than the whole house above it. Shelves had been carved into walls, and all were full. "Hello?" Nightingale called into the dark, stepping forward a little. "Is someone there?" She already had her weapon drawn. After all, this might be the killer. "Hello?" Someone replied from the darkness, imitating Nightingale's fearful tone. "Is someone there?" They froze. Then a woman emerged from the darkness. She walked strangely, jerking and stumbling along. With a snap of her fingers, the cellar lit in a purple glow as huge eyes opened from nowhere. Continue the boss fight, Melody. There's Melody. There's Purple Eye. And here's the scene. Alright. So I actually really like this boss fight because it shows that you can actually make boss fights that don't have insane levels of HP. Melody only has 30 HP. She does have 12 defense, no armor, movement 6, combat dice are 2 reds. Conviction is a teal and green, and her Cassian die is a teal. She is a subjugated oblation, which is a type of, essentially an Esper type thing. Her passive ability is the Eyes of Magdalene, or Magdalene, how you should pronounce it. Melody has Nimble, which means the first time she gets attacked, she dodges with +1 shield. Melody draws line of sight as though she occupies the same space as all Eyes of Magdalene, in addition to the space she occupies. When Melody would be dealt damage, and there are still Eyes of Magdalene on the board, reduce that damage to 0 and deal 1 irreducible damage to all Eyes of Magdalene instead. After Melody is dealt damage, place an Eye of Magdalene on the board. Her actions are the following. Are there no opponents adjacent? Cast a spell 6 against all opponents within line of sight. Inflict Condemned, which is the one where you roll during your stats phase. You roll a black die. If it's a skull, you die instantly. Is there an opponent adjacent? Make a separate melee attack against each opponent within reach 2. Then swap places with the farthest opponent within line of sight. So in other words, you literally swap positions. Continue down. Is there an opponent within line of sight? And this ability has not been used this encounter. Summon Exalted Esper Minos the Contractor against the opponent with the highest total armor value within line of sight. And then the final thing, which is if everything else doesn't apply, or after the continue downs. Well, actually, this pretty much happens after she uses the Exalted Esper. Is there an opponent within line of sight? Cast spell 6 against the opponent with the lowest conviction value within line of sight. Roll 2 purples, 2 oranges, 2 reds, and do 1 magic damage per book rolled. And then her symbols is +1 magic damage for every book, and +2 magic damage for every burst. So there you go. Right now, there are 4 eyes on the board. Excuse me. And then I'm just checking, was it Minos? Yes, Minos Contractor. So she actually has the ability to call in Minos the Contractor, which is an Exalted Esper. An opponent with an SOI is dealt magic damage equal to the number rolled using both their conviction dice, and then it inflicts condemn. So the good news is I don't actually have very good conviction dice, so this won't do as much damage. But if I roll badly, I can still take about 14 damage if I'm not careful. So yeah, that's the gist of it. Anyway, the conditions are you have to beat Melody, or if you get defeated. The special encounter rules, pretty standard stuff. Whenever you defeat Melody, you read the stuff below it. It's ambushed. When sidling up this encounter, after dealing the initiative cards, move Melody forward 1 space on the initiative track. This boss only has 1 initiative card, thankfully. Eyes of Magdalene. These tokens represent the magical presence of an otherworldly being Melody has brought to this realm. These tokens may be targeted by attacks and spells as though they were a figure. In addition, an adventurer may occupy their space and may attack them while occupying their space. These tokens have 5 HP, 10 defense, no armor, and a conviction value of 2 purple. Eyes of Magdalene do not make break attacks and do not drop combatant loot. If Melody ever places an Eye of Magdalene, players roll 2 purple die and consult the chart below to determine how many tokens are placed. So 2 through 9, add 1, 10 through 14, add 2. Anytime eye tokens are placed, players always place the first eye token on tile UM69, which I think is, it's this one, the one that she's in right now. On the farthest space possible from adventurers. Then they place a second eye, if required, on tile 71 on the farthest space possible from adventurers. There may never be more than 4 eyes of Magdalene on the board. A connection. At the start of Melody's first turn, choose a random adventure and read the following hidden text. So that's what she'll do on the first turn. And then the first time Melody has damage tokens placed on her card, in other words, once she gets wounded, after placing any eye tokens, read the following hidden text. Loot level's common, so we'll go ahead and get that set up. And yeah, so we got that going for us. So we got Melody here. Our setup is in the bottom right here, so we're going to go ahead and get set up there. We'll put Rook in the back for now. Okay, and then we'll put Zeke in the back. And we'll put Nightingale here. So a neat thing about Melody is despite the shield that's on her that essentially prevents all damage, you can't reduce damage that's irreducible. So things like Precise Strike can actually pierce it if you roll high enough. Poison also will do wonders to Melody because poison is irreducible as well. So it's a really cool fight because there's so many ways you can kind of get around the barrier if you need to. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and call it a video here. When we come back, we'll do the boss fight, and then there'll probably be a lot more story to go through. So, I am the Depressed Eeyore, and this was Middara. See you guys next time.